All right, welcome here, everyone. I am excited about this. These are very special to me personally because I have been the last 20 some years, I don't remember how many, 23, 4 years, working at a university. I have a love for helping university students. And 3 years ago, Dr. Schofield, who's a history professor, hatched this marvelous plan to allow history majors, but young ones, freshmen and sophomores, who are just learning how to do history, to do projects with the museum. And this is our third year to do that. We actually have in the audience two superhero representatives, the Hutter sisters. One was in the very first class and stood up here and presented her project, and then her younger sister took it the second year and did her project last year. So now they're in the crowd just to boo and hiss and make fun of of the other students. Now they're on the other side and have achieved. So this is really exciting because it is not really common that a freshman history major can get their hands in an archive and work with artifacts. You're going to hear some actual people working with things that they don't normally get to do in a museum. And so it's a wonderful opportunity for them. And we see that play out now as we have some of the students from the first classes who have gone on. We had a young lady here from the first class, Bella Vita, who spent this whole semester living in this room back here doing a major research project for her capstone thesis paper. And you'll hear a little bit of that story from one of these students as well. So anyway, this is just very exciting for me. I will also say this about tonight in particular. Every year, these are good. Every year, there are students who are better than others. There are students who worked harder, and this year, there's no exception. There are a few students, and they know who they are, who didn't quite do it as much work. And yet, the outcome of this, I got to hear their previews on Tuesday. I think this might be the best set of presentations we've ever had. So I hope you really enjoyed this. I am going to give you two very quick updates on the museum itself. Behind us here, we flipped the room and we put stuff up here to hide what you can't see. We are tearing out this wall right here, getting ready to put in a new exhibit. That'll be going up just in the next few weeks. We're very excited about that. Last week, we got word that we won a grant that is going to pay for us to rip out old ceilings and things in this backside so that we can begin replacing these exhibits on this side, which is just thrilling. And then yesterday I got word that the city got a huge grant to replace the entire roof of our building, which is so good. So it is just, we've had like one win after another. It's really wonderful. And not as great as those things, but today actually was my first day here full time. So just what a series of things. So anyway, we're glad to have these students here. I'm going to introduce Dr. Schofield. She'll introduce the students, and then we'll get right into it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, David Lovegrove. When we were talking about creating an experiential learning class where history students could put their hands into archives and onto artifacts, of course, you've got to build trust with an institution. I mean, the institution needs to trust that you're not going to let your students wreck their stuff. When I first came out here to see what was here, I think I fell a little in love with Greer. And I didn't grow up here in South Carolina, but I've spent more time in South Carolina than I have anywhere else. I don't intend to move out of South Carolina. I love the upstate. My parents live in TR now. I've got my sister in the upstate. If I could just get my brother to move up here, then yeah, we'd have everybody in the same area. It's like David said, I am a history professor at BJU. This is our third year of partnership with the Greer Heritage Museum, and it's been a very profitable partnership. It's been a great hands-on learning experience, but not just for the students, but for me personally. I have learned about conservation. I have learned about ethics of preservation. I've learned on the ground level, in the practical level, the things that I read about, the things that I know are good ways of doing history. And it's really, really exciting to guide students through that process. They learn about preserving things like documents or articles of clothing or other kinds of artifacts, but they also learn about preserving the story of a place. And they get to see at this moment, in this evening, how that story has an impact on the community. We don't do this for just, something that's going to sit on a shelf and not get used. It's for benefiting the community, and I am deeply, deeply grateful to David Lovegrove and Jonathan Lovegrove too, for their vision of what this institution here can be for the community and for students. So I hope that you enjoy my students and their stories about their work. I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves. You'll see their name up on the slides. And we'll come back at the end if you have any questions. And if you didn't get strawberries and cream before, you can get them afterwards. Those are Greer strawberries, by the way. So put a little plug in for Fisher's there. That's where I bought them. And the cream isn't fancy, but the strawberries are. Yeah. So, Emma.
Hello, my name is Emma Drago, and unfortunately, introducing myself is not how I anticipated starting this. So, Audrey Davis was a young... Unfortunately, I'm short.
It's okay. Height challenged.
Yes, that too, fun size. Audrey Davis was a young lady who lived in Greer and was very, very popular with young men all around the country, from especially the 1890s and early 2000s, not 2000s, 1900s, every time. Several of these men very much wanted to be with her. They wanted to marry her and even proposed, and she received over 150 letters that the museum had. So I am not the first person to be trying to transcribe these letters and going into them, and I didn't want to take over the project and accidentally run into what other people have done. So what does one do when one is trying to transcribe letters without running into someone else's work? One goes backwards. I started at the end and came the opposite direction. Who needs to go in the front when you can go in the back way? So that meant I started at 1903 and eventually ended up back in 1893. Ooh, yeah, I got the date right this time. So by the time I ended, it was around the time that she was getting married, and the young men were giving her congratulations, somewhat, and even begrudgingly congratulating the man she married. But that's not the story I'm going to tell. The story I'm going to tell actually does come closer to the beginning, with a young man named Carlos Easley, who was possibly the most desperate. When Audrey and Carlos met, she was 15 and he was 23. However, in his letters, he does not sound like a 20-something. He sounds like an angsty teenager. And in some cases, he sounds like an angsty teenage girl. How he manages that, I don't know. And things went somewhat well, at least between them for a while, and at one point they were even engaged to be married. But there are two letters that basically showcase how things were going before everything fell apart. The first one is July 30th, 1893. Everything is fine. Carlos is very, very happy. He's very convinced that Audrey is happy to be with him. He has just been to a church, a different church than he usually would, because Audrey's church did not have any preaching that day. While at this church, he meets a lot of their mutual acquaintances and is very happy. The preacher there is different, and he goes on with a sermon of about 47 minutes. Carlos says that he enjoyed the sermon. However, he also says that he was thinking about her the whole time and did not hear very much of the sermon. After spending most of the letter telling her how things have been going and how things are going at church, he then proceeds to ask her if she's doubting his love, which is strange because he didn't seem to have that problem beforehand. In fact, he even goes on to say that, promise that you will not doubt my love any longer, for I love you with all my heart. God knows I do. You are the only woman on earth that I love, and if I should have to give you up, it would break my heart. And then, apparently, that's what happened, because just a few months later, after this letter, November 26th, 1893, Carlos writes a very different letter. In this, he is very distressed. There's been a major incident that he is absolutely horrified at, and basically this incident, he brings Audrey to church just a few weeks before, and apparently she did not want him to bring her to church, and she acted, in his word, rather foreign to what she should have done. And he thinks that he cannot come to see her again, at least until she explains herself, because he does not think that he will be welcome with her. He then spends the rest of the letter talking about how he felt that he had intruded, and how the happiest moments of his life had been spent with Audrey. But now it is with sorrow mingled with pleasure that he recalls this, because he thought that he was assured of her love. But that doesn't seem to be the case. As he goes through the letter, he continues to say how she loved him once, and it wasn't without a cause. Obviously, he was well worthy of her love. But now things are changing, and her actions are contradicting her words. He finishes the letter by saying that it's up to her. She can decide whether or not to continue their relationship or whether to end it. But he also wants her to marry him still, and he thinks it's a good idea. This is the last letter on record that he has sent to her for the next 5 years, and it was a major turning point, because in the next letter, he calls her Mistress of Satan. So luckily for Audrey, while things may not have ended well with Carlos, she did eventually have a happy ending and get married.
To Satan.
No, not to Satan. Thank you.
Stay close to the mic.
Okay, I'll try. Hello, my name is Jessica Thompson, and this semester, with the help of Mr. Lovegrove, I settled on a project about the beginning of April, transcribing letters from World War II, and they are called the Robert M. Clark Letter Series. So this letter series is about two brothers that are overseas in Europe, and they're writing back to their family, who actually are from Greer. Now, I was interested in doing letters from World War II because I'm interested in that time period, and it's like farther enough to be history, but also it can be very personal since it's also so close. And this semester we've been talking about how history is like a story. So I'm going to introduce you to the two men, or the authors of these letters, and their names are Bill and Bob. Now, the older brother, Bill, or Private William B. Clark, was in the 8th Air Force. And the letters begin with a Christmas postcard and letter to his parents, so it kind of feels like the opening of a White Christmas, if you've ever seen the movie. So Bill's style of writing is more mature and more formal, And since all the letters are being censored by the U.S. military, there's no big dates or events or battles being disclosed. So instead, he talks about his family. So, and there's actually one particular person that he talks about the most, and that's his son. But he's never met his son. So he's telling his parents about their grandson from letters that his wife is sending him from home. So he's going on how proud he is of his son and talking about little accomplishments that he's made, and even his personality that he's starting to develop. But one day he is able to go home and actually visit his family. And so this is a portion of a letter that he wrote on his parents. And it says, "It was wonderful to see my son for the first time, and it had been so long since I had seen Georgia. I am more in love with her now than I was the day we married. Bruce was just like Georgia had described him to me. I don't guess I can even explain the feeling I had when I just got to go home to him in Georgia. It was too wonderful to hardly believe. And to have a wonderful little guy call me daddy, well, that was wonderful." So now the second author of these letters, the younger brother, known as Bob, or Robert M. Clark, since he's younger, his style of writing is more informal and carefree. So he talks to his parents like he would with any other friend. And so at the beginning of the letters, he basically complains the entire time. He complains about being drafted. He complains about basic training. He gets transferred to a new unit. He complains about that too. And when he gets done with that, he then tells his parents about all the exciting adventures he's doing. So he's visiting all the towns that they're traveling to through Europe and also probably South Asia. But towards the end of the letters, we do see some character development. And so he says, "To tell the truth, I believe the Army has helped me. I am more settled than I was and know my way around better than I did." So it was interesting to see from the beginning where he started. He requested his parents every time to request for him to go home and not be drafted in the military. So that was kind of cool to see. And then half of the letters are before the war, and then the rest that I have not finished reading are after the war. But immediately after, both brothers work for the 8th Air Force as engine technicians, checking airplane engines. And even after the war, Bob, the older brother, makes an interesting observation in one of the letters. And he says that everyone's acting, or everything is going on here as though nothing ever bad happened. And I thought that was an interesting observation. Let's see. So we don't know, since I have not finished reading the letters, I don't know how Bob and Bill's story ends, but we do know a little bit about what happened to the 8th Air Force after the war. So they actually suffered half of the Air Force deaths, and they had 5,100 aircraft losses, but they had 11,200 aerial victories. And then once the war ended in July, which is about where I got to reading the letters, they went to Okinawa, Japan, and trained combat against bombing to kind of just keep everything calm since Japan was still restless. And then in June of the next year, 46, they went back to America and had a base, which I believe was Fort Worth. And then, so the Robert M. Clark letters definitely had like an ordinary, everyday outlook, but on extraordinary events, just on a personal outlook of what the war was like. And so I really enjoyed working on this project. Thank you.
Hello. I just want to start by thanking Mr. Lovegrove and Dr. Schoolfield for giving us this opportunity to learn, and thank all you guys for coming to hear what we have to say. So I did my project on textile conservation. So the museum had an old trunk full of vintage clothing come in, dresses from like the late 1800s. They're children's dresses. And so I've been working on those. They are dresses that belong to William and Roxy Ann Wilson. If you guys have ever seen the medical buggy that they usually have right here, they owned that as well. And the dresses were stored in a wooden trunk in the Wilsons' home in Greer, and they were in that trunk for probably about a century. So they were pretty rough shape. I'm going to talk a bit about the process. So started with the research. It was very hard to do research on how to conserve the dresses because a lot of the sources were on like how they would have washed and cared for their clothes back in that time, which isn't really helpful now because they've changed so much. They're very stained. They're brown from acid staining, most of them. But prior to receiving them, I did do a lot of research on the makeup of the dresses and how different materials react to water and the proper way to handle them because they are very old and can fall apart easily. And then some of the materials I used was gallons of distilled water, some large wash bins, a plastic board, which is actually to help with the handling of the dresses. You have to keep them supported when they're wet, otherwise they rip at the seam. And then there's special laundry soap. It was just unscented, uncolored. Some towels to dry them. And then they get stored in acid-free tissue paper and special storage boxes. I did a bunch of research into the prep for working with them as well. You have to set out your materials beforehand and make sure you have everything ready before you start the process, and remove any accessories or jewelry that will snag, so a watch or anything, because there's lots of lace on these dresses. They're very, very pretty. And also allowing proper time, because especially for a college student, if you start your project, you throw a dress in the wash tub and you realize, oh, I'm going to be late to class. You can't just leave it in there because you'll wreck it. So it took a lot of thinking ahead, which is not always my strong suit. So that was a very helpful thing to learn. And then some of the results, I was able to remove a lot of layers of dirt. This is before it was washed. So it's very brown, very wrinkled, super stiff. I was able to remove several layers of dirt and dust and just general grime. The wash water in the bottom, after it's settled, there is this, Mr. Lovegrove described it as coffee-colored sludge, just sitting in the bottom, because they were so gross. But they are a lot less stiff now as well. And this is one of the ones that's washed, so it actually like hangs loose and it's not all stiff, which is really, really cool to see. And then for the continuation, I would love to see someone else, or maybe even me in the future, be able to work on them more, and maybe even try with like different chemicals and see if they could get some more of that acid staining out and just keep removing layers of coffee-colored dirt. And then what I've learned from working with these and just working with the museum is like the way it's interesting to see the way different people place values on their items. So these dresses are nicer kids' dresses, so they were probably in very good condition when they were first put in the trunk, because they would have not been worn very often and people would have placed value on them while they were using them. And it's interesting to see that when they're like, oh, we no longer have a need for them, they just kind of threw them aside. And it's interesting because people don't often think about them and their possessions being part of history. And so they often don't think about preserving their own possessions, which is just kind of interesting to see. Thank you all for coming.
tall. Well, my name's Ella Gravely, and I did my project on the death of Samson, or Jimmy Steve Bowers, in other words. So originally, I was actually doing my project on the Greer Police Department, but I was struggling to find a specific area to focus on, and Mr. Lovegrove had mentioned Samson, and what first caught my eye was that there was a lot of rumors about his death, some pretty morbid ones, but also just really interesting.
Played soccer with his head. He won't say it, so I will.
Yeah, the rumor he originally told me is that after his death, they cut his head off and played soccer with it, which is not true. So, yeah, how I started off with this project, I looked through different newspaper articles. There wasn't a lot because the Greer Citizen they don't have any from the time period that it happened, so I looked through the Greenville News, but I also was able to do an oral history with Mr. Green, and he gave me a lot more understanding of that as well. So I'll start off with the rumors so that we can get over those. Some of the rumors that I heard first were the soccer ball, but as well I also heard about how he loved to ride the Bilo bull, which I personally did not know what that was, so I had to look it up. And you can only really see its legs, but it's pretty large and on top of the store. He enjoyed riding that. That is true. He did do that. But he was not killed off of the bull, which was a rumor that I had heard. And I had also heard that it was gang warfare that was involved in his death, but Mr. Green believes that it was just a lot of friends that really looked up to him and enjoyed being around him. I also had heard that there was multiple schools involved, which also wasn't true. So we'll start with who Samson was. He was a young boy. He was about 20 when he died. He was known in town as a bully, pretty much is the best description of it. He was a bully. He loved attention. He loved to intimidate others and pretty much just bully people anytime he got the chance. He was constantly in fights, and he got his nickname Samson because he loved to brag about how he was big and tough and strong. And so a friend called him Samson, and it just stuck, and that's what they did. He was known to carry a knife, which I have over here. He was known to carry a hawkbill knife, and he would have it in his pocket, like slightly open, so he could pull it out and fling it out really quick and cut someone, and he cut people on many occasions. And actually, on one occasion, he got cut himself, and Mr. Green, who worked part-time with a funeral home that had an ambulance service, he had taken a patient to the emergency room, and Samson came in, and he had gotten cut, and he went to the doctor, asked him to clean him up, and he said to the doctor to take his time because he was too mean to die. And little did he know that statement would not be true. So he really thought that he was this big guy, and no one knows what made him the way that he was. He just was a mean guy, and they were tired of him, and everyone had heard about the things that he did because he did a lot of bad things. And so on May 17th, in the A&G shopping center, he was riding the Bilo bull, and he got down after his time gallivanting up there. He was walking home as he lived close by, and a car pulled up beside him, got out, someone shot him twice with a shotgun, jumped back in the car, and they drove away. Later, Mr. Green and the ambulance showed up, and they took him to the Spartanburg Hospital with his head on, and he later died. And it was found that he had about 117 to 132 shotgun pellets in his body. He had a feud with the boys that were suspected of killing him, and so they had 7 suspects, the police did, and no one actually ever got convicted for his murder because none of the boys would speak up. They wouldn't tell who did it, and they wouldn't tell on each other, so no one ever got convicted, which the newspapers say otherwise, but Mr. Green said that no one was convicted for that. And the sad truth was that everyone was happy that he died, They were happy that he was gone because they didn't like him bullying them and being mean to them and cutting them with his knife. I wish I could have found out a lot more about him himself. He has just a really interesting story, and with his knife, Mr. Green also said that he could come out of his pocket with that knife and cut you faster than Wyatt Earp could shoot his gun. So I wish I could know more. I wish I could have found out more about what the feud was between him and the boys. But Mr. Green had said that a lot of things during that time that he was alive weren't covered in the newspaper because they were just small, petty things, and there was a lot of crime in Greer during the time. And he finished out our interview with saying that back then Greer was a wild place. And I thought that was just a fun statement because Greer has such a fascinating history, and I've enjoyed being able to look into it. And if you want to know more about the crime in Greer of the time, Mr. Green and the museum are actually working on a book. So you should make sure to check that out in a couple, I don't know when it's planning to come out, but they're coming out with it. August. So yeah, thank you. What was the question?
What year did?
1964.
64.
I was worried I was going to have to move this down. Well, good evening. It's good to see you all here. My name is Spencer Nikolai, and I had the lucky privilege to study Mr. Eric Bridwell's life, and he is actually here with us this evening. So if we can get a round of applause for Mr. Bridwell, I'm very happy to have him here. During this semester, I was given the opportunity to enhance my historical research skills. And I kind of just picked a topic and dove headfirst into it, hoping I didn't drown. But before I explain the specifics of what I studied, I kind of want to give some of the technical aspects of the work that I did. So at the start, I was given a name, a place, and a question. The name, Mr. Eric Bridwell here. The place, right here in Greer, South Carolina. And the question, what do I do now? As I began to ponder, I came into this topic with very little understanding. And luckily, I had Mr. Lovegrove here to help me out, and he was able to give me a myriad of different artifacts and things that he actually pulled directly from the house that Mr. Bridwell used to live in. And so I was able to pore over pictures and receipts from the grocery store, marriage licenses, baby books, contracts, all kinds of things. And I was finally starting to piece together a little bit of this story, right? But I hit a bit of an impasse. The artifacts were helpful, but there's only so much that I could put together with just pieces of paper and things like that. I needed to meet the man who I was actually studying. So, once again, I came to Mr. Lovegrove, and he put me in contact with Mrs. Bruton here, and I was able to set up an interview with Mr. Bridwell, and we got to talking, and we had a very nice 3-hour-long conversation. And I would love to go into all the specifics that we discussed, but I would not be able to do it justice in just this presentation alone. So I think it would be beneficial and hopefully interesting to you all if I just give a little explanation of who Mr. Eric is and a little bit about his life. Eric Bridwell was born on March 10th, 1957, to Mary and Frank Bridwell. He was an only child, but he was driven by his educational accomplishment to excel in everything that he did. And this was really what drove him to his success. There was one influential figure in his school years by the name of Mary Hayes. She was a guidance counselor at Greer High School, where Mr. Bridwell went to high school, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with that place. And she was able to encourage him to actually start planning for college when he was only in the 7th grade. I don't know about you, but I don't even think I was thinking past high school when I was in 7th grade, much less trying to plan where I was going to go to college. But with Mary's help, Eric was able to get an early admittance into USC, and with his exceptional SAT scores, he graduated in just 2 years and continued working towards law school. He continued at USC Law School, where he fine-tuned his analytical problem-solving skills, and he became the youngest law graduate in the state of South Carolina at the time. Eric continued working on his politically bound career, and he wrote several articles for the Greer Citizen, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And it was very interesting going through all the boxes of stuff that we had, and I found a pile of papers that was probably about this thick. And I started flipping through it. I was like, oh my goodness, these were all written by Eric Bridwell. These are all articles that he had written for the Greer Citizen. That was so fascinating. But this introduction into the political realm brought him to work at the Chamber of Commerce. And not only that, but his mother, Mary Bridwell, was appointed, there's the Greer Citizen. His mother was appointed as the first female magistrate judge in the local district. And I thought this was very endearing that Eric noted to me in our conversation. He said that her lasting legacy left those around her represented her courage and her fairness in all the cases that she dealt with. I thought that was very sweet. And before I continue, I thought I'd just share a little story that Eric shared with me when we were talking. He said, when I was young, we had drills at school to prepare for nuclear attacks. This was during the Cold War. They'd tell us to get under our wooden desks for protection. Once I asked my dad, how would you come get me if a nuclear bomb had hit? He kind of chuckled and said, son, if that happens, nobody's coming to get anybody. It was strange hiding under those desks, thinking we'd be safe, when even as a child, you kind of knew better. It was a different time. And, while it's a sobering time that we obviously all know, I thought that was an interesting tribute to Eric's mindset that, even as a kid, he was thinking ahead and he had those critical thinking skills of I have to take care of myself and, figure a way out of this. And that ultimately carried him on through his career and brought him a lot of success. Now, I could go on for quite some time. We talked for a very long time, and it was wonderful to hear all of his stories and hear about his life, and I'd love to continue on this project, but it actually brings me to my final point. Some of you may be wondering if there's a way that we could continue this kind of work specifically on this project, and maybe what kind of research would I be able to do to help continue this story? Well, at this point in the story, I would say the most valuable contribution would be electronic copying and formatting for different types of artifacts. It's like I said before, it's very helpful to have physical evidence, papers, letters, pictures, things like that. But sometimes it's difficult to deal with things directly as they're trying to preserve these things that have been kept for several years. So it would be very beneficial if we could get help formatting things, getting things scanned, like pictures and documents, and put on the website. And then people who want to access the Greer website, they can do their own research, they can find things online, and have direct access to all those kinds of things. But again, there's a lot more information to this story, and I just want to say thank you to Mr. Lovegrove for giving us all these resources, and I'm sure all my fellow students are very thankful for that. And I want to once again thank Mr. Bridwell for giving me his time and sharing his wonderful life story. He's been a very fascinating character to learn about and to get to know personally. But thank you all very much, and appreciate your time. Sorry, I got away with this.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Evan Grant. You probably saw me eating a lot of strawberries earlier, and you can't quite see it anymore, but there was a lot of red on my fingers, but it's mostly gone. So my name is Evan Grant. As you know, I'm a student at Dr. Schofield's class. I spent my time in this project trying to search for a lost documentary film of Greer. This film was created it was produced in 1947, and it showcased the culture, the people, and the history of Greer entirely. It ushered in that small town pride that you find people at Greer are known for, really. It was shown in theaters in 1948, and after that time, the film never really showed again. It would be considered as what people would call lost. The film, over time, would go into several different states, you could say. During the time, the film would be found by the then fire chief Bobby Colvin, whilst the Grand Theater of Greer was being demolished. Bobby Colvin would go into the movie theater and he would find this film reel in a little cubby, and then he would take it with him, basically preserving this film, making that it would not be actually destroyed entirely, saving it. After this time, the film would spend quite a lot of time in Mr. Bobby Colvin's collection. Around in the 90s, Mr. Bobby Colvin would send this film to the University of Southern Carolina. Along the way, the film reel would be turned into a VHS tape, and then to a DVD tape, and then eventually the DVD fell into the hands of the museum, which would then be digitized. Actually, is now what plays in that theater behind you. At any time, you can come in and watch this movie for whatever reason you want to watch it, to experience the history of Greer in those times, see how it looked like, how it might differ from today. You can now watch it whenever you want. Sorry. But where was the original film? Where was the original film reel, in its entirety? Well, our very own Mr. David Lovegrove, the museum director, would inquire to Mr. Colvin after learning that Mr. Colvin had the film as to where it was. Mr. Colvin would begin searching through his house for a period of time, trying to find it. And eventually, Mr. Colvin would come to the realization that he might have sent it off to USC, and he may never have gotten it back. And that was what I was left with, picking up this project. My goal was to try to find this film's location, to see if the museum could recover it, and recover this lost relic of Greer. But you might ask why. What is the full purpose of trying to find this film reel? Well, there are many reasons. One, it's a relic of Greer. It was made for Greer to be watched by people of Greer, so it deserves to be in a Greer museum, wouldn't you say? Also, the film in entirety, the actual original reel, might have leftover information that was never put into the VHS tape and then into the DVD. It might have lost information that we don't know of. Maybe lost pictures, video, people who we might never even know really existed, aside from a birth date. Starting out, I did not have a lot of information. Only two leads, Mr. Bobby Colvin and people at USC. I was able to get contacts through multiple people and online websites. I was able to create a contact list of everybody I should email about this, especially in the USC film department. I would send a few emails here and there, a few times to specifically to the museum library over there at USC. It would be a while before I would be sent emails back. After a couple weeks of not receiving emails and sending multiple, I finally got an email back saying they could not find the film in their archive. I kept sending emails and asking them to search again in different locations. They kept searching. Nothing ever turned up. And that made me kind of scared. If they couldn't find this film, where would I go to next? To Bobby Colvin? To where else? I was very scared. I thought maybe, just maybe, that they might have found it. They might have just had it sitting somewhere, maybe hiding somewhere. Or maybe they were lying to me. I don't know. I'm not pointing any fingers. But I never got an email. All I got was hit with, sorry, we did not find the item. After a while, I began to admit defeat and decided I should start looking elsewhere. I started digging through my contact list, and I found that maybe I could try emailing the production company, people who produced the film, people who actually created the film. They might have had a copy of the reel. I tried to find out where they were, what happened to them. I found what I believed to be an email owning by them, and I would send multiple emails to them. Also, never getting anything quite back. And I thought, but I never did quite get any solid information. All I ever got was that the USC might be a dead end. So to conclude this tragic tale, this search for the film reel, it is not tragic to say the least. The film is still ongoing, or the search. There's still much work to be done to find the film, and I'm sure we are very close. Maybe it is still in the vast film library at USC, which it is very vast. I have been there before. Perhaps it's still in Mr. Colvin's collection, or perhaps it was maybe destroyed along the way. There's only one way to find out, and that's to find it. Whoever is next to take up the mantle of trying to find the film, I'm sure they will succeed where I have failed. But let's not be saddened by the destruction of the film, for again, we can watch the film in its entirety right over there, here in the Museum of Greer. So with all that, that is a great triumph at the end of the day. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Isaiah Medina, and starting out this project, we actually, as a class, came to the museum and looked around, and Mr. Lovegrove said, like, if anything catches your attention, like, try to study it, do research on it. And so what I thought was really interesting was this organ right behind me. They had 3 of them in the museum at the time and almost no history on them. So I thought, like, okay, I think I should do my research and study how much I can get out of this. So there was also a roadblock here because there wasn't much information on the organs like itself. Not much came with it. So for like, I don't know, like 2 months, I was stuck trying to figure out what to do. And so eventually I came back to the museum, and me and Mr. Lovegrove actually opened this thing up to see if there was like a serial number or just anything to give more details. Eventually we found, actually it was a warranty slip, but I'll talk about that later. But we didn't really find much detail, and then we started looking through like newspapers, like online, and we got somewhere. Like, it was very interesting. I love this actually because it wasn't so much on the actual like history of the organs, but also the company too, and a little story in here. And so this organ is most commonly called a pump organ or a reed organ because, well, you pump it with your feet down here and then it produces airflow, and it also reed because it has little reeds in there that are tunable. And so for Greer, and actually a lot of the South and America during this time, it was actually very beneficial and like almost like easy to get your hands on one of these because it was like in mass production, because everybody wanted these for their house. For like churches that couldn't afford like a huge pipe organ, they would go to one of these and use that, which was very helpful. And it was way cheaper and easier to move around than a piano, because a piano you have to like deal with the humidity, you always have to get it tuned and stuff. But for this one, you can just like turn the little things and like the reeds, and it's way easier than having somebody come in and tune a piano. So there was like in the late 19th century and early 20th century, there was this organ boom, I like to call it, where everybody wanted an organ. So that's where all these organs come from. And so just a history on the actual company. The company, it's stated right here, and it also has its like crest engraved into the pedals here. And it's called the Shipman Organ Company. And it was actually the only organ company in the South after the Civil War, because the South was just struggling with like companies and everything. And there was 653 organ companies, but 75% of them went out of business after the war. So this one was the only company in the South, which is interesting because this wasn't founded until 1905. So this was like 40 years after the Civil War, and they were still having trouble, which I found really interesting. And so according to the County Record newspaper, this is where the warranty slip comes in, an organ can last you 5 years because it says every shipment organ is insured by factory against fire, flood, tornado, lightning, or total destruction. So you could get your hands on an organ, and then immediately, if something bad happens to it, you can get one for free. Ironically, the Shipman Organ Company burnt down. And it burnt down on March 10th of 1911. The entire plant was just destroyed. And the actual plant is located in High Point, North Carolina. So it's about a 2-hour drive from here. And so yeah, it burned down, and the fire seemed to have started in the engine room, and it just kept billowing and billowing. And then it gets to the story of this girl. She was around 16 to 17 years old, and she worked in the company with her father. And the High Point Enterprise newspaper states that she was on the second floor when all of a sudden smoke just started pouring in her workspace. And she didn't know what to do, and she couldn't find anywhere to go. So she runs and jumps out of the second-story window and lands in a peach tree, and then stumbles out of that. And I thought it was so funny because the newspaper says the Enterprise called her soon after the incident and found she escaped with only a few slight bruises. However, she was very much excited. I thought that was so funny because it still shows that, yeah, she was working and everything, but you can still see that like teen spirit in her. And so, another interesting thing that I found, which I find that humanity likes to do a lot, is dramatize things. And so the newspapers that like go further out, like for example, Greer or Greenville, they twist the story a little bit, and they say that, oh, her father was there, ready to catch her in his arms and take her away. But that's not really what happened. The firemen came over, and yes, her father was there, but there was no catching her out of the second-story window. But I do really enjoy learning that story about the company and how it just influenced all of America, actually. And even though it burnt down in March, in May of that same year, it was totally rebuilt. Whole new company, but with a new name because the owner died actually around the same time that the fire started, but he didn't die from the fire. And so it remained because of the owner, the name William Shipman, and then that lasted until like 1924, and then I'm not really sure what happened after that. But for any future projects, for anybody who wants to dig more into this, I would really like to know about like the actual like organ in like the town and how it like, because I know there were musical groups down here, and I would really like to see how the organ was influenced, because I know it was used in churches and homes to sing hymns, but I wanted to see what else anybody can pull out of there. So to wrap this up, I'm not the best musician, but I'm going to play a little bit of the organ so you guys can hear what it sounded like. And this is no performance, by the way. I'm used to playing piano. I don't play organ. Ooh, wow.
Sounds great.
And that's all I can do.
Do you know what year this organ was made?
Do you have the warranty slip here or no?
We have the warranty slip, and it says on it, as he said, we opened this all up. We actually, took all the panels off, and You know what silverfish do to paper?
Oh, yeah.
Silverfish had done that to the paper inside, so we couldn't read it. So then we found the warranty slip, and it had the model number. I don't think it had the year, but then there are people that have collected and figured out these numbers were made during these years. So I think we're just like this far from knowing, at least within a few months period, but we're not quite there yet. Yes. I was coming up to say, do you have questions? They left out all kinds of stuff. So are there things, were you left with any questions about what they're asking? Yes, ma'am.
You make eye contact, don't ever do that with me. I thought you mentioned that the young man's name was Easley.
Carlos Easley.
Right, so is that like Easley, South Carolina?
Son.
Okay, was Carlos Easley related to Easley? What's your answer?
Son.
Son. Colonel Easley, that Easley was named after, colonel in the Civil War, very powerful man in the area. Carlos, then a very wealthy young man, from a wealthy family, and a very angsty teenage 23-year-old. All right, yes, ma'am.
Who is Mr. Green?
Who is Mr. Green? Who's Mr. Green?
Paul Green. He was a police officer, as well as I think he worked at the one of a fire station as well, I believe. But he worked part-time with a funeral home, and they had an ambulance service. So, yeah.
Yeah, Paul Green, you'll get to meet him when we get his book launch out. We'll have him for a History and Donuts. He, as a teenager, he was a projectionist in the Greer Theater. He then started volunteering as a volunteer firefighter. That turned into a full-time job, but the fire department and the police department were beside each other, and so he started moonlighting with the police force. He found the police needed him more than the fire needed him, so he became a full-time police officer. And then he became Greer's first investigation officer. So he was essentially a detective. He was the one that collected evidence, took photographs, and I'll just give you this heads up when his book comes out. He had in his collection, right on the corner here is the bank that just went out of business and is getting. That bank was robbed at gunpoint, and he had in his collection a photograph of the robbery taking place, and it's like a movie. Ski mask, gun at the teller's head. So that picture will be in the book. So anyway, yes. And he also worked as a professional photographer and as an ambulance driver. And then he became a fire chief in another town. And he's elderly, but his mind is a steel trap, and he remembers every detail. I mean, he was a detective, you can tell. So an amazing man. You'll find out more about him over the next few months. Yes?
Since he was a projectionist, perhaps he knows where the movie is.
And there you go. Different theater, but the film was at the Grand Theater. And was found in the Grand Theater's projection booth when they tore it down. So, yes, ma'am?
Why was that young lady so popular? 150 suitors. What the heck did she have going?
I honestly don't know. I guess they just really liked her.
Was her dad rich?
Her father was a real estate investor in Greenville. He was quite well-to-do. And she had you think about in the 1890s, she had the luxury of a college education, which was not common. So she was well-to-do. That young woman, Audrey Davis, has inspired more interest in our community than just about anything else I have ever seen. So the other Bella Vita Sanders, who did her major capstone project, did that project on her letters, has done a huge amount of research on them, and there is going to be much more research going on. We have found she has a great-granddaughter who lives in Tennessee who's named after her, and is a school teacher, and we're at the end of the year, so she hasn't had time to talk with us yet. But anyway, Audrey Davis was an absolutely amazing young lady, and we're still trying to put together all the pieces of what that was. Yeah. And
pictures of her? Because 1890.
We should have pictures. We have not proven that we have one, but she had in her collection a series of pictures of young men and one picture of a young lady. And throughout all of those letters, a common theme was, you send me a picture of you and I'll send you a picture of me. And so with a series of young men and one young woman, it just seems really likely that that's Audrey herself, but we haven't proven it yet. And we're hoping that the family, there are descendants we've tracked down, we're hoping they'll be able to help us. Okay, any other questions?
I had questions while they were talking.
And now you don't remember what they are. They are here for you. Go talk to them. They all know a lot more than they said because we kept their time short. Pester them and make them talk. Historians tend to be shy and not like to talk. And so this is great educational experience. So thank you all for coming.